Sometimes we hold on to things God's been trying to pull us from. We love deep, we hope strong, and we pray that maybe this time, this love, this connection will be the one. But what do you do when the very thing you're holding on to is pulling you down? What do you do when staying is breaking you more than leaving ever could? Let me help you recognize 6 clear signs that our relationship ain't for you. Sure, here's an expanded version of that point. Keeping it in the same style as the speech. You were never meant to live life in fragments, cutting off pieces of yourself just so someone else can feel more comfortable. But too often we get caught in relationships that demand we shrink. You start off bold, confident, full of life and purpose. But slowly, little by little, you begin to adjust. You adjust the way you talk, the way you dream, the way you love, just so you don't disrupt the peace. And before you know it, you're a watered down version of the person God created you to be. It starts small. Maybe they make a comment about how you laugh too loud, and the next time you catch yourself holding it in. Maybe they criticize how passionate you are about your goals, and suddenly you're second guessing whether you should even pursue them. Maybe they tell you that your standards are too high, that you expect too much, and so you start accepting things you once swore you never would. This is how it happens. One compromise at a time, until you look in the mirror and don't even recognize the person staring back at you. Love was never meant to make you feel small. If someone truly loves you, they love all of you. The bold parts, the loud parts, the ambitious parts, the growing parts. But when you are with someone who is intimidated by your fullness, they will find ways to make you shrink. They will question your confidence until you start doubting yourself. They will downplay your dreams until you start believing they don't matter. They will make your emotions feel like a burden, so you start silencing your own needs. And the more you shrink, the more they grow comfortable, because your smallness makes them feel big. Real love doesn't require you to fit inside someone else's limited view of who you should be. Real love expands with you, stretches with you, grows with you. But when a relationship requires you to dim your light just so the other person can feel secure, that's not love. That's control wrapped in affection. There's someone who doesn't want a partner, they want a puppet. And the danger of staying in that kind of relationship is that over time, you start believing that the smaller version of you is the real you. You start believing that the dreams you once had were too big, that your voice was too much, that your expectations were unreasonable. And once you believe that lie, you become trapped. This is why so many people stay in relationships that break them, because they don't even realize they've been broken. They don't realize they've been conditioned to accept less, to tolerate disrespect, to settle for inconsistency. And when they finally get a glimpse of what real love should feel like, love that celebrates, love that builds, love that makes room, they struggle to receive it. Because when you've been forced to shrink for so long, expansion feels unfamiliar. It's time to wake up. It's time to recognize when you are in a space that no longer honors who you are becoming. Some relationships were never meant to last forever. They were meant to be a lesson on self-worth, a lesson on discernment, a lesson on trusting your intuition. And one of the biggest lessons you will ever learn is this. Don't you embrace all of you? Your fire, your flaws, your fears, your faith. They won't ask you to be less so they can feel like more. They won't be intimidated by your confidence, your independence, or your calling. They will stand beside you, not above you. They will push you forward, not pull you back. And if that's not what you have, then maybe it's time to stop asking God to fix something He's been trying to free you from. Because real love doesn't require you to shrink. It calls you to rise. If there's one thing you should never have to sacrifice in a relationship, it's your peace. Peace is not just the absence of arguments, it's the presence of security, clarity, and emotional safety. But some relationships will have you walking on eggshells, constantly questioning yourself, constantly feeling uneasy. And the sad part is you'll start thinking that's normal. You'll convince yourself that love is supposed to feel like chaos, that being in a relationship means accepting emotional instability, but that's a lie. A relationship that steals your peace is not from God. There is a difference between working through challenges and constantly being in turmoil. Every relationship has moments of difficulty, but when every day feels like a battle, when your spirit is always heavy, that's not love. That's bondage. God didn't design love to be something that drains you, confuses you, or breaks you. Real love builds. Real love strengthens. Real love brings a sense of peace that no argument, no disagreement, no outside influence can shake. But when you're with the wrong person, that peace becomes a distant memory. It starts subtly. Maybe at first, it's just small moments of tension. Little things that make you uncomfortable, but don't seem like a big deal. Then, before you know it, you're losing sleep over conversations that left you feeling unsettled. You're replaying words in your head, trying to figure out if you were wrong for feeling hurt. You're questioning yourself, wondering if maybe you're just overthinking. But deep down, you know something was right. Because when you're in a relationship that steals your peace, your spirit feels it before your mind can process it. And the enemy knows that if he can disrupt your peace, he can distract you from your purpose. That's why some relationships come into your life looking like love but feeling like confusion. You think you've found something good, but suddenly your joy is replaced with anxiety. Your confidence is replaced with doubt. The things that once gave you fulfillment feel distant because your mind is consumed with trying to make sense of something that was never meant to be yours. Love should not make you feel like you are constantly in a state of survival. You shouldn't have to analyze every text, overthink every conversation, or wonder where you stand with someone who claims to love you. Real love provides reassurance, not uncertainty. When you are with the right person, you don't have to beg for consistency. You don't have to fight for basic respect, and you don't have to carry the emotional weight of a relationship all on your own. But when you're with the wrong person, you will always feel like you're chasing a peace that never lasts. And let's talk about manipulation. Because some people will destroy your peace and then convince you that it's your fault. They will do things that hurt you, then turn around and say, you're too sensitive. They will dismiss your feelings, make you feel crazy for expressing your needs, and gaslight you into believing that the problem isn't them, it's you. And if you're not careful, you'll start believing it. You'll start shrinking yourself, suppressing your emotions, and tolerating things that God never intended for you to accept. This is why discernment is so important, because sometimes we pray for God to give us peace, but we refuse to walk away from the thing that's stealing it. We ask for clarity, but we ignore every red flag that He places in front of us. We keep trying to force something to work when God has already shown us that it's not meant for us. When God sends love, He doesn't send in the form of confusion, fear, or inconsistency. He sends it with clarity. He sends it with mutual respect. He sends it with a foundation that can withstand the storms. But when you are in something that constantly has your spirit in distress, something that disrupts your joy and leaves you emotionally exhausted, you have to ask yourself, was this ever from God? Or was it something I tried to make work on my own? Peace is one of the greatest indicators of whether something is aligned with God's will for your life. If you have to constantly fight for peace in your relationship, if you feel more anxious than assured, if your spirit is in a constant state of unrest, that's not love. This warning. And the longer you ignore it, the more it will cost you. There's a certain kind of loneliness that hits different. The kind that creeps in even when someone is lying right next to you. The kind that lingers in a room filled with conversations that feel empty. The kind that makes you question whether love is supposed to feel this hollow. And before you even realize it, you start disappearing. Not physically, not in a way that anyone else can see, but little by little you start losing pieces of yourself. Feeling alone in a relationship isn't just a sign that something is wrong. It's a sign that you are losing the parts of you that once made you whole. At first, you might brush it off. Maybe you tell yourself that all relationships go through phases, that it's just a rough patch, that eventually things will change. You try harder, you give more, you bend and stretch and compromise, hoping that if you just do a little more, you'll feel that connection again. But no matter how much you pour in, it never seems to be enough. Conversations become surface level, affection feels forced, and a person who once made you feel seen now looks at you like a stranger. And that's when it starts, the quiet unraveling of who you used to be. You stop speaking up about what bothers you because you're tired of feeling unheard. You stop sharing your thoughts, your dreams, your fears because the space that once felt safe now feels distant. You find yourself existing in the relationship instead of being in it. Showing up physically but feeling absent in every other way. And the saddest part? You start accepting it. You start convincing yourself that maybe this is just how love works, that maybe expecting to feel deeply connected to someone is asking for too much. But love was never meant to feel like isolation. You should never feel like you are doing life alone while standing next to someone who promised to walk with you. A relationship is supposed to be a partnership, a safe space, a place where you can lay your burdens down and be reminded that you are not in this by yourself. When that is missing, when the connection fades and the loneliness settles in, you don't just lose the relationship, you start losing yourself. Because when you're constantly pouring into something that isn't pouring back into you, you begin to run dry. You stop recognizing the person you see in the mirror because all the joy, all the excitement, all the light that you once carried starts to dim. You used to laugh more. You used to dream more. You used to believe in love in a way that felt hopeful, not heavy. But now, you just feel tired. Tired of trying. Tired of feeling unseen. Tired of existing in something that was supposed to make you feel alive, but instead makes you feel invisible. And the dangerous part about this kind of loneliness is that it doesn't just affect your relationship, it affects how you see yourself. You start wondering if maybe you're the problem. If maybe you're too needy, too emotional, too much. You start second-guessing your worth, questioning whether you even deserve the kind of love you long for. But let me tell you something. The problem isn't that you want too much. The problem is that you're in a space that can give it to you. Real love doesn't leave you feeling alone. It doesn't make you wonder if you matter. It doesn't make you feel like you are the only one fighting to keep something alive. Love, in its truest form, is felt. It is present. It is active. And if you have to beg for connection, if you have to constantly chase after attention, if you have to diminish your own needs just to keep the peace, then what you have is not love. It's an illusion of it. And yet, so many people stay. They stay in relationships that make them feel isolated, because they are more afraid of being alone than they are of losing themselves. But let me ask you this. What's the point of being in a relationship if you already feel alone? What's the point of staying connected to someone who doesn't truly see you, hear you, or value you? You deserve more than a love that makes you feel like an afterthought. You deserve a connection that is deep, intentional, and present. You deserve to be in a relationship where you don't just exist, but you thrive. Because the moment you start feeling alone in something that was meant to be shared, you have to ask yourself if you're truly in love or if you're just holding on to something that's already let go of you. Red flags don't start as billboards. They start as whispers, as small moments that make you pause, as things you tell yourself aren't that serious. At first, they're easy to ignore. Maybe it's the way they dismiss your feelings. but you tell yourself they didn't mean it. Maybe it's how they avoid accountability, but you convince yourself they just don't like confrontation. Maybe it's the lies, the inconsistencies, the way your gut tells you something is off. But you push it aside because you want to believe in the potential more than you see the reality. But ignoring red flags doesn't make them disappear. It only allows them to grow, to dig deeper into the foundation of your relationship, to turn into something that will one day be too big to ignore. And by the time you finally admit that something isn't right, you're already in too deep. You're emotionally invested, tied up in history, bound by the hope that things will get better, even when everything in front of you is proving otherwise. The truth is, most people don't ignore red flags because they don't see them. They ignore them because they don't want to accept what seeing them would mean. Accepting them means admitting that this person might not be right for you. It means confronting the fear of starting over, the fear of being alone, the fear that you've wasted your time. And so, instead of facing the reality, you make excuses. You convince yourself that no relationship is perfect, that every love story has its struggles, that if you just love them harder, stay a little longer, pray a little more, maybe they'll change. But red flags don't fade with time. They become warnings you wish you had listened to sooner. The disrespect that started as a joke turns into full-blown disregard for your feelings. The small lies you brushed off become patterns of deception that leave you questioning what's real. The inconsistency that you convince yourself was just them being bad at communication becomes the reason you never feel secure in the relationship. And by the time you realize how much pain these red flags have caused, you're not just hurt by them, you're hurt by yourself. By the fact that you saw the signs but stayed anyway. Ignoring red flags doesn't prevent pain, it only delays it. And the longer you stay, the harder it becomes to leave, because every time you overlook something, you teach yourself to tolerate it. You teach yourself to accept less than you deserve. And the more you accept, the more you lose sight of what real love should feel like. Real love shouldn't require you to abandon your boundaries. It shouldn't make you question your worth. It shouldn't leave you feeling anxious, confused, or constantly trying to prove that you are worthy of being treated right. And let's be honest, sometimes the biggest red flag is how much you have to convince yourself to stay. If you're constantly battling between what you feel and what you know deep down, that's not love, that's a warning. A warning that this isn't where you're meant to be. A warning that the person you're fighting for isn't fighting for you in the same way. A warning that love should not be something you have to beg for. And the pain of ignoring the signs doesn't just affect your heart, it affects your spirit. It wears down your confidence, your peace, your ability to trust yourself. You start doubting your own judgment, wondering if maybe you're just being too sensitive, too dramatic, too unrealistic. But the truth is, your intuition was never wrong. It was warning you from the beginning. The only difference now is that the consequences of ignoring it have caught up with you. This is why learning to trust yourself is so important. The first time you feel something isn't right, listen. The first time you catch yourself making excuses for someone's behavior, pay attention. The first time you realize you're questioning your own standards just to keep someone in your life, stop and ask yourself if this is love or if this is just a lesson you haven't learned yet. Because the pain of walking away now is nothing compared to the pain of staying in something that was never meant for you. Love was never meant to strip you of who you are. It was never meant to make you question your worth, your purpose, your identity. But some relationships will do just that. They will make you forget the sound of your own voice because you've spent so much time trying to match theirs. They will mold you into someone you no longer recognize, not by force, but by slow, quiet compromise. And before you even realize what's happening, you've lost yourself. Not all at once, but piece by piece. It starts small. Maybe at first it's just adjusting the way you dress because they make little comments about what you wear. Then it's changing how you speak because they say you are too opinionated, too strong, too much. Maybe it's setting aside your dreams because they don't support them. and it's exhausting to constantly defend yourself. Little by little, you start choosing silence over speaking, staying over standing up for yourself, shrinking over shining. You tell yourself it's just part of the process, that love requires sacrifice, that all relationships require compromise. But there's a difference between compromise and erasure. Love is meant to complement you, not consume you. If being in a relationship requires you to strip away the very things that make you who you are, then what's left of you? If you have to silence your voice just to keep the peace, if you have to pretend to be something you're not just to be accepted, if you have to become a version of yourself that even you don't recognize, then what you're holding on to isn't love, it's control disguised as connection. And the longer you stay in that space, the harder it becomes to remember who you were before you got there. Losing yourself in a relationship doesn't always happen because someone demands it. Sometimes it happens because you so desperately want to be loved that you willingly give up the parts of yourself that don't fit their version of who they think you should be. You downplay your intelligence so they don't feel insecure. You shrink your confidence so they can feel bigger. You stop talking about the things that light your soul on fire because they don't seem interested, and eventually you convince yourself that maybe those things don't matter anyway. But they do. You do. And any love that requires you to erase yourself in order to be accepted is not love at all. The most dangerous thing about losing yourself in a relationship is that at first you don't even realize it's happening. You think you're just adjusting, just compromising, just making it work, until one day you look in the mirror and can't remember who you were before them. The things that once brought you joy don't even cross your mind anymore. The passions you used to chase now feel out of reach. The strength you once had is buried under the weight of a relationship that was never supposed to take this much from you, and you wonder if it's even possible to get yourself back. But let me tell you something. Who you were is not gone. She's still in there. The one who laughed without hesitation, the one who dreamed without limits, the one who believed in her worth without question. She may have been quieted, may have been buried under years of compromise and self-doubt, but she is not gone. And if you are in a relationship that is costing you your identity, the most powerful thing you can do is choose yourself again. Not the version of you they want, not the version of you that makes them comfortable, but the full, unapologetic, beautifully whole version of you that was always meant to be. Because love, real love, doesn't strip you, it strengthens you. It doesn't ask you to let go of yourself. It holds space for you to be everything you were created to be. And if the love you're in is costing you that, then it's time to ask yourself if this is love at all, or if this is just something you've been afraid to let go of. If you saw yourself in any of these signs, it's time to ask yourself the hard question. Why am I still here? Love should not require you to betray yourself. Love should not break you more than it builds you. And if it does, then it's not love. It's a lesson. Baby, don't be afraid to choose you. Don't be afraid to walk away from what's killing your spirit. Because on the other side of your letting go is the healing, the peace, and the love that God always had in mind for you. Let it go.